think as people are hearing this, it will have just been announced that Mel Brooks, the 99-year-old man, which is your next documentary, is premiering on HBO Max in the new year. I got to see the 2-part documentary already and absolutely loved it. As I said, as a comedy nerd, it was right up my alley. Can you talk about putting that one together? I mean, you feels like you set out to discover something new behind this public persona of Mel Brooks, who everyone, has known for a long time. And he has a very, he's a character in an outward facing way, but I think you try to get to something below the surface as well a little bit in this film.
Well, you're the first person to have seen it. Like literally, I think you're the first person I've spoken to outside of the people making it who have seen it. So I'm glad that you liked it. I think, the intention was to do a movie with Mel Brooks that was very personal. There had been some documentaries before which talked a lot about his career, but Mel didn't get into his feelings about his life. And I thought, I wonder if I could get a reflective Mel Brooks. And so we, sat down and did about 10 hours of interviews, and he's very, very sharp. I mean, I can't remember anything or anyone's name. He never is like reaching for a name or forgetting a story. He couldn't have a better memory for his life. But I tried to get him, to talk about, his relationship with Carl Reiner and what was that about and why were they so close? And, to talk about Anne Bancroft and what she meant to him and about their love and their romance and her support of him. And, this is a guy who was in World War II and was traumatized by it. He grew up during the Depression. And so, he has a lot to say about how that informed his creativity, because he did have this career where he did go after power. And if you watch movies like The Producers and Blazing Saddles and History of the World, he's making fun of, the people that abuse the citizenry. He's attacking authoritarianism. I mean, a lot of it is very applicable to what we're seeing right now. I mean, he really was the first person to just go so hard against the Nazis. And so we get into these really interesting conversations about what his intentions were for all of that work.
Was there something you felt like you really learned about him that you didn't know before going into it?
He talked a lot about just how scared he was early in his career and how insecure, because when he got a job working for Sid Caesar at your show of shows, he was buddies with Sid Caesar. So Sid Caesar paid him out of his own pocket to just be around. He wasn't even a credited writer in the beginning. And he really felt insecure, like he was going to be found out, like he was a fraud. And he just talked about like getting sick and vomiting from just nervousness. And he's working with the greatest writers of all time, like Larry Gelbart. And that he went to therapy to try to deal with this paralysis he had. And he said to the therapist, I'm just so having kind of like I'm a fraud, and the therapist said, ask for a raise. and he goes in and he asks for a raise, and the producer's like, no.
Yeah.
And so he says to Sid Caesar, I'm so depressed. I'm not credited on the show. I'm trying to get paid like the other writers. And then Sid Caesar went to the producer and said, give him the credit and give him the money, because if you don't, I'm going to give him the money and I'm not going to be happy about it. And Sid Caesar stood up for him and got him the gig, like the official gig.
Yeah.
And just stories like that, just about the man and the struggles, he went through to become that person, to get in a place where he could do daring work. And that, it took decades.
Yeah. I mean, and even, thinking about the producers along the lines of what we were talking about with these movies that don't necessarily hit with an audience when they come out. I mean, that was one that we think of as, one of the greatest, if not the greatest comedy film of all time. And it was not an instant hit with audiences either.
Yeah. And mixed reviews. And that's always just a good thing to know, that, when you do interesting work, sometimes you take the hit for it, and then, people are inspired by it. And then sometimes it's rediscovered. Sometimes it's not. But yeah, that was a movie that, he said he went with his family to see it. And there was literally like no one in this like 1,000-seat theater. And they all thought, oh no, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that movie, the satire of that movie is so daring. And I think the same for Blazing Saddles, which you explore a lot in the film as well. Do you feel like there's enough of that happening now, comedy being used to take on powerful forces in the government or things like that?
Well, we hope, that people continue to find ways to do that. The dynamics of it are so fascinating. Stephen Colbert, is suddenly forced to end his show next year. But at the same time, South Park couldn't go harder against the administration. And it's the same company, and they've somehow been grandfathered in because they generate so much money. And it's the one thing that Trump never talks about out loud.
It's crazy, right?
And it's also the one show Republicans watch because they've always attacked the left and the right. So in a lot of ways, it's very important because I think it's being seen by people who might look at it and go, yeah, they're going at him hard, but some of this makes sense. What they're making fun of and what the kind of corruption that they're pointing out. Mm-hmm. So, you hope that there's not so much consolidation of all these companies that one by one, they don't remove all the voices that speak truth to power, because, we need that. But, it is a little scary because it's algorithms and people can be, quietly diminished on these platforms. I'm always seeing on platforms like satirists or people who make these kind of incredible, hilarious political cartoons. And they do talk about some of them, like they realize like, oh, no one's seeing this. Yeah. And a lot of that is invisible to us, how that happens.
Yeah. Well, I think it's encouraging at least that both Jon Stewart and Jimmy Kimmel have now extended their contracts at least by a year, I think. So they're not going anywhere quite yet. Because there was a moment there where it felt like they all might go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, the country basically stood up and said like, yeah, we really don't want you to do that. And that was going to lead to a much larger, round of protests. But the thing to be concerned about is, sometimes just like they'll let there be one liberal on one talk show on Fox so they can say they have the point of view, that it's a very managed amount of talk of resistance.
Why do you think Trump doesn't go after South Park the way he goes after all of the late night hosts? Is it not on his radar? Is nobody telling him about it? You think he knows about it, but is too sort of chasing to say anything?
Who knows? Maybe they have a secret plan of what they're going to do to South Park. I mean, I really don't know. I'm surely someone just said, you're not going to win that one. But that doesn't mean that they're not like, sitting in a room going, what do we do? But the fact that he's silent about it is interesting because you always wonder, like, why does he speak out? And does he even write any of these Truth Social posts?
Yeah. I don't know.
So who's the person that's like, don't mess with South Park? I mean, one day we'll probably find out about why when those things aired, they just said, be silent. And the truth is you should be silent because the second you complain about it, 10 times more people watch it. So it might be that they know how accurate this criticism is, and they really don't want more people to know about it. Yeah,
it feels more dangerous than the jokes that are happening in the late night monologues, which are kind of, I mean, they can be great, but they're kind of the same night to night, and there's a theme to it. But South Park is really pushing the envelope in ways that I don't think anyone could have imagined going into this season. Yeah,
and it's very sophisticated, and it is about corruption.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone talks about whatever, the Satan and all those jokes, but the show has been about crony capitalism and a government that's not concerned about working people.
Yeah. Going back to sort of Mel Brooks and these documentaries that you've been making about comedians, you've done George Carlin and Gary Shandling. Do you ever think about what the film about you will look like, maybe when you're 99 years old?
I don't. I mean, some people have asked me about doing something like that, and I'm always like, no, Like I want everyone else to let me do it about them. But if anyone ever asks me, I'm like, no, there's nothing interesting there. It's just a workaholic nerd. There's no great story there. Once I let this man in France make a documentary about me, but you have to really be French to find it.
Really?
But that's like 10 years ago. I just thought it would be cool to have a documentary where everyone's talking French. The narrator's in French, and it just makes me seem fancy. Makes me seem like, if people are talking in another language about you, then clearly you're doing something well.
Well, I know you have more documentaries coming as well. I just saw the Maria Bamford one got into Sundance. Congrats on that.
Yes, Paralyzed by Hope, the Maria Bamford story. Me and Neil Berkeley, who made the Gilbert Gottfried documentary, have been following her around for about 3 years. And,
incredible.
She's one of the great stand-up comedians of all time, and is just a real brave, incredibly imaginative comic force. And it just came out so well, and I just think she's the best. So I'm very excited for people to see that.
And what's the status of the Norm Macdonald one? I know you've been working on that as well.
That is going to be out next year on Netflix.
Oh, wow.
And it's, I think, going to be called The Norm Macdonald Wormhole. And it's I think, a really great way to experience Norm. We didn't interview anyone. It's just a collage of Norm.
Oh, wow.
And, he did so many interviews, and there was endless amounts of the best jokes you've ever heard. When you start lining it up, you realize how brilliant he was, because there was so much material that was the best thing you've ever seen. So that should be out later in the year. Yeah,
I'm sad that I never got to have him on this podcast, but I did get to interview him once on the phone while he was on a golf course. Yeah, and just telling me OJ stories and SNL, and it was that was definitely a highlight. Yeah, I used to write jokes with him for Roseanne's stand-up act. Wow. When he first moved to Los Angeles. And very quickly, Roseanne realized he was the funniest person ever and hired him to be on the TV show Roseanne. And then just a few months later, he got hired away to be on Saturday Night Live. Do you think you'll direct a comedy feature film again anytime soon? I think so. I've been writing a movie with Glenn Powell, a country music comedy that we're looking to do in the spring, and that all seems like it's happening. So hopefully in about a year that'll come out. Are we moving to This Is 70 yet, or what's the status? I know it was This Is 60, This Is 50. I guess you're still under 60, right? I'm still under 60. It can be any number. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be. People think it needs to be in tens. It could be anything. But when you get older, I say this in my stand-up, all your jokes become about decay. All your jokes are like, don't you hate when you get diverticulitis? And so sometimes it's less fun to do it. But it's funny, my daughter, Maud, directed a movie called Poetic License that stars Leslie and Cooper Hoffman and Andrew Barth Feldman. And it's coming out in May. And it's like an empty nesting, nervous breakdown comedy, and it's really sweet and really, really funny. In a lot of ways, that feels like another tale, but from Maud's perspective. And I'm excited for people to see that.